Tarek Patel here. Welcome into the Southern Section Sit-Down. SB Live presents another episode, and we've got a special guest, of course, as always. And this week we have Reggie Morris, head coach at Redondo Union. He's been in college. He's been in various high schools. He's coached some pros, ones that you've definitely heard of before. We'll get to that later in the show. Stick around. Reggie, thank you for joining us today on the show.
Thank you, Tarek, for having me.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think I always like to start with the origin story. Let the viewers know who you are, what the basketball influences were for you. I know your father was a big influence of basketball. Just kind of maybe talk to us about, maybe it was shooting hoops in the driveway. I don't know, going to games, watching your dad coach. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, being that my dad was a coach for over 40 years at high school, JUCO, Division II level, and a Division I assistant coach a couple times, I was brought into basketball from birth. Started playing at an early age. Had a love for basketball. Always around it. Kind of saw how my dad impacted young people and how people respected him and looked up to him. So, I started playing. I played at Westchester for Coach Ed Azam, who's one of my mentors. And then my senior year, I played at Locke High School for my dad, and just was able to play there. Went to Southwest Community College, played for my dad again. And then from there, I got a scholarship to play at Howard University for 2 years and graduated there. And then started as a grad assistant right away out of college at Mount St. Mary's for a guy named Jim Phelan, who's like top 5 all time in NCAA wins. So I learned a lot right when I got started and got a phone call back home. One of the assistant principals that was an assistant principal for me at Westchester when I was in school was the principal at Lusinger High School. So he needed a basketball coach. My dad called, Coach Azam called, and they gave me the opportunity. And, I always have to be grateful for people who kind of pave the way and help you out, but it's kind of your job to do what you need to do to keep your spot. And so first year we were able to go 20-10, and we made it to the CIF semifinals. Had a guy by the name of Darrell Wright who ended up playing 10 NBA seasons, and just a real good guy. And just over the course of the years at Lusinger, was able to coach a lot of good players. Several went on Division I. Another one that you were speaking of earlier, Russell Westbrook, played in high school all 4 years at Lusinger. Wasn't the same Russell Westbrook we see now.
Sure.
Wasn't the big, strong, fast. He was just, but still had the same tenacity, grit, and heart that we always knew that when he grew into his body, he would become a phenomenal player, but never as good as he has become as a Hall of Fame player. Just thought he would be just extremely competitive and go as far, even if it was just in the business sector. I thought he would be just a really successful person. He was an honor roll student, both there and at UCLA. So from there, just coached there, and I made a lot of stops. Just everybody comments on the stops.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They do.
And, I've been blessed. God blesses me to be able to go places and to impact different people and to have a different experience. Somebody's referred to me as like the Larry Brown of high school basketball, which is cool. Like I come to grips with my story is going to be my story.
Sure.
And I'm okay with how it's gone. I've never left a place and people could say bad things about me, or, we always try to leave things better than how we found them. But just enjoying coaching kids at different walks of life. Been from Lusinger to St. Bernard's to Redondo to college. Coached in college a couple years at LMU and at Pepperdine. So worked for really good people, Mike Dunlap and Lorenzo Romar, who's like another mentor to me. Coached at Culver City a year in Fairfax, which I was able to go and coach in the city section, which was always something that I dreamed about doing because growing up in the city section, that was life for us. Just we were familiar with the Southern section teams, but city section was just how I was raised. So I was able to win a city title there. And back to Redondo now, where kind of settling in and enjoying my time there. And it's always been home for me, even with this being the second go-around. I've really enjoyed my time by the beach.
When you somewhat compared the city to the southern section growing up, I mean, it's only in the last, what you want to say, maybe 15 or 20 years? It's not been that long that the southern section has been the perennial section.
Right.
before that, for tale as old as time, the city is where you wanted to play your high school hoops. Can you touch on that a little bit?
For sure. If you ever look back at the champions, the state champions, the regional champions, the sectional champions, a good city team was always going to beat a good Southern section team. And that was probably into the middle 2000s or so. I would attribute it to probably inner city people moving out to the Inland Empire, which now you'll see a lot of the Inland Empire teams that are a little stronger than they have been in the past. Kids going to, people becoming more affluent and being able to send their kids to private schools. So moving out to the Inland Empire, finding better means and better places to live for their families, and just those things have kind of been where the city section is taking a hit. But before that, just thinking of like the Valley was like the Southern side. It was like, oh, you're going to play Taft or you're going to play Birmingham. And those things were like, wow, those are real far. But now, even just with the advent of social media and people being more familiar with one another, the cities and the region is a lot closer together. People are driving to different places that we just didn't go. We were kind of bound by the walls of LA County. But now basketball is extended and everything is extended, and so you just kind of have to just attribute it to that, and times are changing.
When I got to kind of get back to the Russell Westbrook, big name, everyone knows who he is. Let's go a little deeper on what he was as a high school player. See, nowadays, Coach, you'll know this, most programs know the incoming freshmen that are coming in. You'll know you got a couple, maybe this guy's a varsity guy, but these two guys are JV guys, and in time they'll be guys. Was Russell Westbrook one of those kids, or did he kind of show up out of nowhere?
So Russell got there when I got there, so he was a ninth grader my first year.
Okay, you guys came in together.
But he played on the Frost-Off team. So Russell played on the Frost-Off team, and we kind of watched him a little, and, we invited him to a practice. So when the season was over, we moved him up to kind of have him practice, and we saw him on a Monday, like, you need to come to practice today. And he was like, oh man, I didn't bring my stuff. So he didn't bring his stuff to practice, but he practiced in these low top Air Force Ones, and he was about 5'8" at the time, and he wore like a size 14 shoe. So these big white shoes were all over the place. And we had like 2 or 3 guys, we had like 5 guys over about 6'5", 6'6". And he'd go in the drills, and Russell was a little bitty guy kind of flopping around. And he was challenging all the bigger guys. And, they were kind of pushing him around, but it didn't matter. He'd keep coming and just keep looking like this little guy. He was impressive that way. He was constantly ready to compete and be intense, and he wouldn't back down. And from that day, it was like, we need to invest time and effort into this kid, because he has the heart and the intensity that it's going to take to be successful. So
is when you see, it's like, man, he needs work, but you can work with that tenacity every day, all day long. Give me that kid. Do you see that nowadays in your players? And is that a kind of a staple? If you see that competitive edge, give me that. I'll do the rest, per se.
Yeah, no, that's the main ingredient. If you're coachable and you have a desire for the game or a passion for the game, I think the rest can be worked on. We don't necessarily look for the highest jumping guys or the fastest guys. Sure, those attributes do help in making good players, but the best players are the guys who are able to compete every day and that are focused and they have just a genuine love and passion for the game, and they leave it all out there. And so those are the kind of kids that we all like to coach.
You've coached at the college level, obviously at the high school level. You know the pro game. How hard is it to bring it every day? That sounds easy. Yeah. It's not.
It's not easy as an adult, as a teacher in the classroom, as an accountant, as, just anybody who has that's a part of any profession. It's not an easy thing to do. So to give of yourself physically every day is one thing, but then to be able to come out and give of yourself mentally and to push yourself. So like great players like Russ, or the greatest players that I have, they have a chip on their shoulder, and it's almost self-created, and they keep it there on purpose. They can remember different things, and they make up different I wouldn't say lies, but they make up different stories to themselves to motivate them on a day-to-day basis. Like just certain people didn't give them a chance, and they remember it.
Sure.
And
Left
it's
off a list.
Left off
That's
a
a big
list.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lists, teams, just overlooked for scholarships, and they remember stuff as far back as when they were little kids. And so they keep those chips on their shoulder, and it keeps them going. And those are the tend to be the best types of players.
It's kind of funny. I think about it sometimes. I was actually talking about this with my wife. It's like sometimes like a sliver of insecurity on your work really can create something really, really special. I do believe that. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to, because you don't see your name on the list or you're not on the all-area team. Now you're like, man, maybe I'm just not good enough. Well, I'm going to go make sure that I'm not left off that list. The last thing on Russ, now from his freshman to his senior year, and from the little that I know about that, kind of a late bloomer in regards to his recruitment. Can you maybe share some detail on just that development and then him getting that attention?
Yeah, for sure. Russ was 5'8" going into his 9th grade year, but by the time he left his senior year, he was 6'2". So just his physical development, that's why it's really difficult when you watch today's landscape with parents who are ready to microwave everything and puppeteer everything. Some things just happen organically. Most things do. To see Russ kind of go through the process, go from being, on the Frost-Off team to like a marginal starter his 10th grade to being MVP of our league 11th and 12th grade, and watch his recruitment go from no one recruiting him to LMU to like Creighton before they were in the Big East.
Sure.
Creighton and Kent State, and then by the end of his senior year, being recruited by Miami, North Carolina State, UCLA, Arizona State. He had really big options towards the end, but he kept hungry, he kept at it, and he was always ready to go and ready to prove himself whenever people would come and watch. And it wasn't just with scoring, it was like leadership. He was willing to do things and play hard so his teammates followed behind him. He wasn't, it was his team. And he realized that the success of the team was based on not only how hard he played, but how hard he could get the other guys to play. So his recruitment jumped 100%, and you could see it going into his senior year. He was invited to Adidas All-American camp, and it was kind of a favor done for a couple of us where we called in favors and like, hey, can we get Russ in? So they were like, yeah, send him down. We'll get him in. So we sent him down to Atlanta at the time, and he gets to the camp, and they get to the front. He went by himself, so it wasn't like today's athlete where parents go with you everywhere.
Sure.
He went by himself. He figured it out. He goes, and then he registers, and we don't have your name on the list. So he's like, well, okay. So he calls back to like, Coach, they say they don't have me on the list. And I was like, hold on. So I called my contacts, and they're like, okay, well, we were able to do this, but just tell them to hold tight. There's going to be somebody that doesn't show. So Russ was waiting. He waits. So my heart is beating because we had this kid in Atlanta, and it's
By
like,
himself?
I thought you said he was in. They're like, yeah, it's going to work out. So about 4 hours later, somebody didn't show, so he's in. So Russell is on the team. So they put Russell on the team. He's not, like you said, he wasn't really announced. He's going into his senior year, and he's not really announced. And he's on a team with, like, Wayne Ellington and Mike Beasley.
Okay.
And he comes off the bench. But because he plays with those guys, and they're, like, top 2-3 guys in their class, just a number of people watch him play. And he doesn't play, like, to upstage them. He gets them the ball. He does all the little stuff. So by the end of the week, he had all these people calling, like the UCLA people start calling. People start offering scholarships. It was like, whoa. And he did it off the bench, just kind of playing his role and just playing with fire and passion, but just getting there, not even knowing he was going to be a part of the camp to taking advantage of it. And then he started being named in some national things. And so he took full advantage of his opportunities, and he can remember all of these things little by little. He can remember that people that they said were better than him at that camp.
Sure.
He could remember just all kind of stories, and it's like, Okay, like I don't know if people look at it like that, Russ. I don't know if no, that guy, yeah. So Russ is always ready to go.
Sure.
But he's one of the nicest human beings
Yes.
that you'd ever want to meet. Generous and caring and looks out for his people.
Yeah, I want to say, oh God, we might have to cut this out, but I want to say he is the most giving former UCLA athlete back to the athletic department. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's true.
I would like to say that. I know he given a $5 million donation. The practice facility is named after him.
Right. Through your coaching time, who are some of the best players you've coached against?
Best players I coached against, I would say Stanley Johnson would probably be one. He was so dominant as a high school player. Who else was really? He stands out. Drew Holiday,
Of course.
was really good. James Harden, DeMar DeRozan. Who else? Brandon Jennings. Those would be like some of the guys that really stood out, and just being able to see, like we think OJ Mayo.
Okay.
Yeah. Those would be some of the guys that are like, wow, they were really good high school players.
You got one state championship.
Yes.
Right? Your first stint at Redondo Union. Can you talk about that season a little bit, and what sticks out to you about winning a state championship, which is really, really hard to do?
Yeah. First year at Redondo, they were coming off of like a 6-win season, something like that. Just poor morale, but guys that were good basketball players. So we came in, and what sticks out is we were about 6 and 7, and we went into a game against Bishop Montgomery, who was like number 3 or 4 in the country at the time. They had the Thompson brothers, they had Jordan Shekel, they had a lot of guys who ended up playing after high school. And Redondo had lost by 50 the year before.
Oof.
So we had a whole week to prepare, and we totally switched a lot of things that we were doing, and we made it really, really simple. And we ended up losing the game by 1. It was a possession game. They got the ball we had the ball at the end and a chance to win, and we couldn't pull it out. And then during the handshake line, there was altercation between our team and their team. I guess a kid from their team said something to one of our kids who they finally realized, like, we are here. Like, we have a presence, and people aren't going to treat us a certain way. So, people pushed, shoved, and it was almost a fight, and we broke everybody up. And then we go in the locker room, and the kids will tell the story. They'll say, we thought you were going to be upset. And, nobody wants the kids to fight, but they stood up for themselves. So I was pleased with that, and I told them we'd have to lose another game that we played. And from there, we won 23 games in a row.
Wow.
Yeah.
So after your kids maybe just needed to know they belonged,
Exactly.
and that was it.
Yep, that was
That's
it.
awesome.
Yep.
That's a great story. Who did you, the journey there, kind of just were there any tight games? Just maybe maybe a little more recall, just tight games, good players you had to beat along the way.
Tight games, all the games were
Okay.
tight. We basically had 2 guys who scored and a lot of other guys who fit a role, and they played their role. So we had a thing that we'd say 60 points or lower. First 1 to 60 wins. And every game from that point on, we kept the other team under 60, except for the CIF championship game. The other team scored like 65. It was against Westlake, but we scored like 75.
Okay.
So we weren't able to manufacture a ton of points, but defensively we were able to get it done. That season, we played in Division II. We played JW North was pretty good. We played them in the regional final. The sectional final. No, regional final. And then we didn't play like a cast of great teams, but we with great players. But all of the teams, like that Bishop Montgomery game, stood out. We played Long Beach Poly earlier that year, and they had Rashawn Prince and Jordan Bell.
Okay. Yep.
They killed us like probably by about 25 or 30. But it was like an introduction to this is what big boy basketball is, and they had to do it. But every game down the stretch, coming down through the playoffs, they were all 2-3 possession games. And we got really good at that, where we fought for every game, and the kids just wouldn't let people beat them. I think they enjoyed winning. And after they got a taste of winning, it just meant so much to them that they would do whatever it took to win.
What about the weight room, Coach? What about training? What about that off-season stuff? Because I think that's obviously really important, especially like you mentioned earlier, when you're telling these kids, hey, this is what a college guy looks like.
Yep.
You know, we gotta put a little muscle on you. How do you incorporate that into your program, and how important is that?
I think at any given point, I think that's also like the difference between city section programs and southern section programs. You see all these programs that are at the top that are open division teams. They have strength and conditioning coaches. They have guys who come in and the facilities are available to their athletes to be able to get out there. You know, we have city section programs. They may not allow you into the gym. They may not allow you into the weight room. So many things like that have to do with litigation and liability come into play, or just having professionals in those fields to be able to lead young people through those things. I mean, things like trainers and those type of, they're huge. So the weight room is huge. In our program, we have a guy by the name of Anthony Brown. He comes in and he works with us also, not only with at Redondo, but with Team Why Not. And he comes in, he does stretching, he does strength and conditioning, nutrition, things that help you to become a better athlete, things that, you know, programs that don't have the means may not be able to do. So it's a lot of fundraising, trying to get those type of people to help you, assist you in your program, because it's so much bigger now than just you have a guy, he's good, and like there's so many things that go into being a good player and having a good program.
The other part of the AAU circuit is that it is connected to high school. So I just have a quick example for you that I think a lot of high school coaches, you got a high school kid that has been working with a trainer and a certain program all summer, and the program's not that great, but you know, he's playing, that's good too, and he's one of the best guys on that team, U16, U17, whatever. He shows up to your fall camp, season starts in November, and he thinks, and parents think, yeah, this should, you know, he should be a starting player, and you're like, hey man, you're like my 8th guy, you're like my 7th guy. Does that happen more frequently now? I know we talked a little bit earlier about kind of the culture you establish with parents, but that seems to happen a lot at the high school level because of AAU.
For sure. I think the advantages that we have as a program is because we are coaches. There are kids that we call, they're coaches that we call when we get their kid. There's been many instances where I'll call the high school coach and say, hey, what are some of the things that you want them to work on or that you emphasize, so that we could kind of be on the same accord. We want this to be a kid that gets the exposure, but also when we return them back to you, that you can use them as well. But then it also goes to what we spoke on, impacting winning. For us, we need you to do this. For your high school team, they may need you to do that. So being mindful of being like where you are needed to win a game. And coaches are always going to recruit winners and people that can help them win. So you need to be adaptable as a player. And those type of, in different ways you'll be used in different roles, and be adaptable, you know, versatile, and always playing for the right reasons.
The landscape of high school basketball, high school sports, I hate to use the T word, but transfer, it's more rampant. When you were a high schooler, when you were coaching earlier in your career, I'd imagine the transfers, it was almost a little bit of a head scratcher if a player transferred. Now it seems to be the norm. What are your thoughts on transferring?
So transferring is part of sports. It's been a part of sports when we were in high school. Like I transferred schools. I just think, I think people put the onus in the wrong places. I think as a coach, if a kid and his family feel like we aren't the best fit for them, then I welcome them to say, find what's best for you, but just make sure that it's best for your kid long term, not just he's going to give you X, Y, or Z today. I think transfers, you know, there was a time where every team had one really good player in high school, and you don't see that as much anymore, because transferring to go play with your friends or go play on a super team, I don't too much subscribe to that, but transferring to an environment that may be better for you in the long term, I'm okay with that. But I think transferring gets a bad name in some instances. I think that there's never been a parent or a coach, never been a coach or a player that's transferred. The only people who can make transfers happen are parents. So for coaches to say one thing and kids, you know, it's not the kid, and you know, coaches may say or do whatever to get a transfer. That's not really anything that I'm okay with, but parents are the ones, and so kids can't check in and out of school without their parent. So parents kind of need to check what are the reasonings behind transferring, and just making sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, for the best.
No, fair point. Didn't mean to corner you. That wasn't my it wasn't my intention.
No. But it's part of the landscape.
But you make a good point about the prep schools and that, man, the southern section and even the city section might, hey man, if the rules actually become too stringent, you're going to lose a lot of your top guys to these prep schools in hoops, obviously. Yeah. So you bring up a really good point, and we are seeing that. Yeah. If you don't mind talking about prep schools, what are your thoughts on prep schools, especially the ones on the East Coast are very traditional, have been around a long time,
right,
but more popping up on the West Coast as of late.
Yeah, for sure. Prep schools, I think it's all positive. I think it could be used for exposure. I think as kids, kids can use exposure for two different means: to get more popular, to become celebrity, or to be able to manage to see exactly oh, we played so-and-so who's really good. I have to use that information to ramp my game up. I think that's how travel ball can be used as well. It's not necessarily about how many followers you can gain. It's about, okay, we play them, and then tomorrow we play him. And then you get to see who everybody's best is and where you kind of fit into that. So prep schools, as they become more prevalent out west, I think there's a positive place for them as well. I think there's something to be said also about a traditional school experience, the going to the dances, going to homecoming, having a real life childhood, and where ball is not life all the time.
Yeah.
Yep. If you don't learn how to manage your social responsibilities early and you become this big great player, how do you manage them when you become professional? There's several professional players who you see get in trouble, and maybe they didn't have the most well-rounded of high school careers, without naming names. Maybe they didn't know that I have to come home early from this dance because I have practice in the morning. They don't have those experience, or, I'm going to a volleyball game, and I'm going to cheer on other people on my team,
sure,
or at my school, so that I can, I expect people to cheer for me. I have to do those things for other folks. So I think traditional schools still have a place, and I still think they're tremendous.
It's always funny to me how if you ask a former player 5 years from now, 10 years from now, of course they remember the games, but most of the best memories are like bus rides or a trip out of town for a tournament. Yep. And I couldn't agree more. That camaraderie is really, really special, and you're having fun with it. And so I guess just really the last one to wrap it up, the goal for you as a coach. Do you have one? Some coaches don't. They just, hey, man, I'm in it. I love it, and that's it. There's really no goal. Is there an end goal for Reggie Morris, per se?
I would say if you asked me this 10 years ago, I'd have an end goal. But as far as it right now, it's just to be the best coach I could be day to day, to inspire and mentor as many people as I can, to give back, because this game has been so special to me, and it's given me a lot of the experiences that I've had in life and the friends that I have, the places I've traveled. So, it's to give back to the players that play, and also to make sure that we have new and upcoming coaches that can take certain situations and they're able to impact the youth as well. So just people gave back to me and poured into me. I think it's time to pour into others and make sure that the game continues to grow and the game continues to give back, and it's those are the main things. And if I'm doing that, I just think basketball has been my calling and it's been my ministry, as of to say to people, and for people to see, just different values in life and different walks and bringing kids together. I mean, it's nothing like it. So I appreciate just the calling of it all on a day-to-day basis.
Reggie, thank you for coming in today. Really appreciate your storytelling.
Thank you so much for having me. Welcome. I'd love to come back anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much. Reggie Morris, using basketball as a vehicle, man, and impacting lives. I love it. He's at Redondo Union High School. That's the end of this episode. I'm Tark Patel from SB Live. Don't forget scorebooklive.com for all your high school sports coverage. We do it nationwide, but of course here in the southern section. Thanks for watching.